After 6 long years, several delays, unfathomable amounts of copium, and countless messages of Silksong when in the live chat of any live stream revealing upcoming games, Silksong is finally here. Multiple games were delayed because of their release, and everyone's been rushing to beat it before they get spoiled by YouTube thumbnails. Everyone's been playing it. So, how is it? Well, I have some opinions. Some that have been swirling around in my head as I play through the game, and that's what I want to share with you today. Hey guys, Alpal here. Okay, so before I begin, I just want to get this out of the way before you rush into the comment section. I have gotten the true ending. And by that, I mean the Mr. Mushroom ending. I'm at 94% completion right now. I've gotten all the tools as well as fighting most of the bosses in the game. So, I don't want to see any "get good" comments below, alright? I've seen a lot of opinions about Silksong floating around everywhere, and I figured I'd throw my own opinions into the mix. And, you know, I am a game dev, so I know a thing or two about game design. So, what do I think about it so far? Well, I think it's safe to say that it's undoubtedly a masterpiece. It's definitely better than the original Hollow Knight, but it also pays a lot of homage to it. It feels like a good sequel. The environments, the music, the characters, so many aspects of Silksong are absolutely stunning when you experience them. I think it's criminal that the game is only $20. That said, it has some flaws. It's so close to perfection, but it has some problems that a simple hotfix isn't going to solve. I have a few gripes with this game, and I'd like to go into depth into what I believe is weighing this game down, and what could have been done differently, or can even be fixed if Team Cherry is looking for feedback. Just a warning, I am basically going to be spoiling the whole game. I'm certain if you're watching this video, you've already beaten the game, or at least gotten the first ending. Just a heads up anyway. With that said, let's talk about Silksong. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about the difficulty. Okay, so this game is pretty hard. Straight out the gate, Silksong shows that it's not going to be pulling any punches, and a lot of those punches deal 2 masks of damage. I think so many enemies dealing double damage has been a central topic of debate surrounding this game, and there's been a whole spectrum of opinions about it. From my personal experience, I thought it was cute at first. I was like, oh wow, they're doing 2 masks of damage this early on? Alright, I see how it is. And I didn't think it was that big of a deal. That was until I encountered the creature. So my main problem with so many enemies and bosses throughout the entire game dealing that much damage is that it fundamentally cuts your health pool in half. Instead of starting out with 5 hit points, you practically only have 3, and you have to calculate that in real time during a boss fight so you know when to heal. Matter of fact, healing is the only thing I ever use Silk for. I hardly touch any of the Silk skills outside of the cross-stitch one, since you can use that defensively.
Oh well, why don't you just dodge the attacks? You won't be punished if you just, move out of the way.
That's true. But the thing is that you have to learn the attacks before you can dodge them. And you're not going to learn the attacks if you keep dying 10 seconds into the fight. Plus, some of those attacks are almost impossible to dodge. Hornet has a pretty big hitbox, and she'll take damage if an attack even grazes her huge ass cheeks. I don't think that bosses and tougher enemies dealing 2 masks of damage is that absurd of a concept. I think it's fine, as long as it's used sparingly. I think it would have been completely fine if they decreased the amount of attacks that dealt 2 masks of damage, like if a boss only had 1 or 2 that did that. Take Phantom for example. Every game with tough bosses always has that one boss. That one. And sometimes it's different for different players. For me, Phantom was that boss for me. I spent like several hours trying to beat them when I first ran into them. The fight didn't even feel that unfair though, and they only had 1 attack that dealt 2 masks of damage. That's fine, I think more bosses should have been like that. If you compare that to something like our good friend, the Creature, a boss that you encounter earlier in the game where all of their attacks deal double damage, it starts to get annoying. Especially when you're trying to pogo off of them and you accidentally miscalculated their hitbox. I think only the ground slam attack dealing 2 masks would have been fine, because that makes sense. Plus there's some attacks that are multi-hit attacks like Lace's counterattack, which is only used as a counter punishment. I think that's fine as well. And hell, even the standard enemies that get possessed at the end of the game dealing 2 masks makes sense. It's the endgame, so enemies are going to be harder. But because double damage is used so willy-nilly throughout the whole game, it just feels irritating, I've seen a lot of people trying to justify the double damage.
Well, it's supposed to be DLC, so you should have DLC difficulty in mind.
I've also seen the other side where it's like,
Oh, well, you don't have to play the original Hollow Knight first. Silksong can stand out on its own.
okay, which is it then? Is this game only for Hollow Knight veterans, or can you play it on its own? And you know you can have both, right? I also saw a YouTube short that justified the difficulty because of ludonarrative dissonance. Hornet is stronger than the Ghost, so therefore the game should be more challenging so you can match your skill level. Alright, we don't need to whip out the fancy buzzwords, guys. We can be adults about this. Plus, if you're going that route, then why isn't Hornet better at killing enemies if she's so good at combat? Oh, well, she takes more damage because she's frail? Then why does she have so much health in Hollow Knight? Ooh, it's because of the haunting, guys! Woo! Yeah, great cop-out. When it comes to difficulty in video games, increasing the stats of enemies like health and damage doesn't automatically make the game harder or more challenging. It just increases the risk of losing. Lots of games, including my own, have enemies and opponents with stats that increase over time, which doesn't make the game more challenging. It just makes it easier to lose, and typically you can negate that by upgrading yourself like more health, more damage, etc. Silksong has that, but the difficulty curve doesn't match the progression curve. You don't start out with enough health to justify all of the bosses dealing that much damage. Miraculously, the game manages to get easier at the end of the game because of that, since you've already been used to all the bullshit it's already thrown at you. If you want the game to be punishing, that's totally fine, just have it be consistent with what the player has unlocked at that point in the game. Some of the later bosses do become more challenging, like having bigger hitboxes that take up half the stage or are much faster, and I don't have any complaints about that. I just think that a good chunk of enemy attacks dealing so much damage, especially early on, is unnecessary. Speaking of damage, I have another thing I want to get off my chest. I'm going to split this section into two parts. First, I want to discuss the needle. So, around halfway through the game, I think for the last judge boss, I decided to install a health bar mod. Something that bothered me beforehand was how long some of the boss battles were taking. Because the game doesn't have health bars, it's hard to tell just how far you are into a fight, and having the mod helps me figuring out when I should save my tools for the end of the fights, so that when I'm on my last mask, I can just throw everything I have with the boss to finish the fight. Something that I noticed is that Hornet doesn't deal a whole lot of damage. Either that or a lot of the enemies have way too much health. I think I installed the health bar mod when I had the 2 needle upgrades, and the numbers showed that it was only dealing about 10 to 12 damage. That's right, how much damage you actually deal with the needle is inconsistent. Apparently some enemies take reduced damage, primarily some of the armored ones. When I went to go upgrade the needle for a third time, I noticed that the damage only went up by 2 points to about 14 or 16. That's not a lot. It means that if there's a boss with 1,000 hit points, which is about how much a small mini boss has, it would take you roughly 60 to 70 hits with the needle alone to kill them. That's a lot, given that you have to manage running around the arena on top of that. The excessive amounts of health was pretty apparent when I was fighting the Unraveled. I was actually kind of getting bored at constantly hitting them, waiting for them to get to the next phase, just so I can die to the double damage nail things. I've also noticed that a lot of regular enemies have a ton of health as well. It shouldn't take a regular enemy any more than 3 to 4 hits to kill, but for some it would require like 5, 6, 7 hits to kill, even at the very end of the game. By the end game, you should feel like a powerhouse, and the lackluster damage makes you feel unnecessarily weak.
Well, why don't you just use the tools? The needle isn't your only source of damage.
That's the second thing I wanted to discuss, the tool system. Throughout my playthrough, I hardly ever used the tools. Why? Because I couldn't. And when I could, I saved up for when I really needed them. Tools are a semi-limited resource. The only way for you to use them is for you to use shell shards to refill them, which you get from killing enemies. You know what that means? That's right, you gotta grind for them. If you're up against a difficult boss and you've used up all your tools, you have to stop what you're doing, go back to an area where enemies spawn, and grind shell shards for like 10 minutes. Then go back to the boss. Or just don't use tools at all. This is a good example of why we should kill gameplay. Go watch my previous video on the end of gameplay to understand that concept. It's punishing you for being bad at the game by sending you back to the shell shard mines. In turn, it also makes the game a lot harder, until you finally beat the boss and you go back to exploring and fighting regular enemies, which slowly fills up your shell shards naturally until you face the next boss, but at that point you're discouraged from using them anyway, so you forget that they exist. This is sort of a similar problem I had with playing Bloodborne. In that game, you have to grind for healing items instead of them being refreshed every time you reach a checkpoint, like in literally every other From Software Souls-like. This has kind of dissuaded me from continuing Bloodborne, since that process was tedious and annoying. Please, From Software, Bloodborne on PC, please! I think grinding for shell shards in Silksong is completely unnecessary. I think it would have been fine if they just refreshed every time you sat down at a bench without using up any secondary currency. I don't think they need to remove shell shards overall. I think you could have it so that you can use them to refresh tools without sitting at a bench, like if you're out exploring. That would encourage people to use them more. Or you can just have NPCs that trade them for rosaries, since that seems to be a relatively scarce resource. Let people use the tools. They're fun to use, and if they're always available to use, combat would be much more fun and engaging. I think what might have caused all these weird design choices are two things: a lack of communication with the Hollow Knight player base, and a small playtester group. Because of the radio silence from Team Cherry during the development of Silksong, nobody really knew what the game entailed outside of the trailers and demos at conventions. If they had more people playing the game before it came out, as well as discussing their design choices with Silksong, I think a lot of the design choices would have been received a lot better. To end on a more positive note, I want to talk about the things that I did like about the game. If it wasn't for what I mentioned earlier, I think I would say this is one of the greatest indie games of all time. Despite the excessive double damage, the strange economy, and the tedious gameplay, it's still a fantastic game. Some of the things that I love are: 1. The visuals. I love the new environments. I was shocked just at how many unique ones there were. Like, I was not expecting a Victorian steampunk era or a freaking underwater area. There's been a few times where I stumbled into something new and I was like, oh god, there's another section over here. It just kept going and going. Some parts of the Citadel felt kinda samey, so it was hard to distinguish where you were. I also like that there's a poison swamp, so you can now officially call it a Souls-like. 2. The music. Christopher Larkin did a fantastic job as always. I bet that Team Cherry was like, yo Chris, people love the music in Hollow Knight, can you just do like more of that? And he was like, yeah sure. And they just made more. I really like how vocal it is as well. Not just in the soundtrack but with the characters as well. Since the Needlin is like the game's equivalent to the Dream Nail, they were able to fit in a lot of additional lore by having the characters sing instead of reading their thoughts. And I just love how much singing there is overall. Chakra's singing is still stuck in my head. 3. The platforming. I love how slick the movement is. Hornet feels a lot more acrobatic in comparison to the Knight. It kind of feels like parkour a little. Adding a run button really made a huge difference. Honestly, it kind of seems like the Path of Pain was a tutorial for the platforming in Silksong. Some of the sections were pretty tough. I really liked the section of Hornet climbing out of the abyss with the lava rising up behind her with the music getting more intense. That was such a hype moment. There is a section at the very top of the world that I think is supposed to be the equivalent of Path of Pain. It wasn't super hard though, so I imagine they might add in an actual equivalent later on. 4. The character designs. I love all of the characters, both NPCs and enemies. It's really cool seeing them expand into different types of bugs like ants, grasshoppers, rhinoceros beetles, and more instead of just the generic bug shape. I also like the animatronics and how they're also bug shaped. I also love the fleas. They are absolutely adorable. I think I love them more than the grubs. I think Flea Dodge was one of the hardest bosses in the game. And 5. Just all the small interactions you can have. There's so many little things that just make the whole world feel real and lived in. Like how there are ruined versions of the paid benches throughout the world, or that there's even scam benches that you have to pay to use once. And like I mentioned earlier, playing the Neolin next to NPCs, they'll sing along with you. I also love the little hornet statue that you get for doing all the bone bottom requests. I think that it's probably one of the most adorable rewards I've ever gotten for a video game. Look, it's a little tiny hornet, that's so cute. I just wish you could put it in your bell home so you don't accidentally destroy it. Overall, I had a positive experience throughout playing Silksong. It's fun, and I think it was definitely worth the wait. I mean, for 20 bucks, it's quite a steal. It's certainly worth more. I would have priced it around 30 bucks or so. I'm sure you're dying to know what my opinion on the price tag is as an indie dev. Honestly, I am a little bit upset on behalf of other Metroidvania devs, but personally I'm not affected by it that much, so I don't really care. Yes, the price does devalue other games that are the same price or even cheaper, because it provides so much more than what you'd expect. But I don't think a vast majority of gamers really care that much. There's always going to be people who are like, well, why would I buy game A when I can buy game B for the same price that has way more content? But on the other hand, there's plenty of people willing to overpay for a game so that they can support indies. The original Hollow Knight was so successful that Team Cherry can afford to make their game cheaper. I kind of see the decreased price tag as a thank you for supporting them to immeasurable success, which I appreciate both as a gamer and a game dev. I think Team Cherry did confirm that they're planning on adding DLC to Silksong, which probably isn't going to be actual DLC and is basically just a free update. So I'm looking forward to when that comes out. I'm not sure what to do with my Clown Wake or makeup since it seems like all the big hyped up games like Tomodachi Life and Metroid Prime 4 are all getting released soon. I think the only things I'm holding out for are Half-Life 3 and the TF2 Heavy update. Thank you for watching this video. I wanted to make something like this not only because it's the current hot topic everyone's discussing about, which is good for the algorithm, but because I just had a lot I wanted to get off of my chest. Hopefully, I didn't upset any Silksong fans. I do really like this game, and I left a positive review on Steam. But it's just so close, you know? Feel free to deal double damage on that subscribe button if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.